Hi, I'm Shlomi Ron, the CEO at the Visual Storytelling Institute, and welcome to another episode of Visual Storytelling Today podcast, where every month I interview very innovative visual storytellers that are making a difference in their clients' lives with really amazing strategies. So today's topic is going to be how stories shape reality. And for this topic, I figured, it's so easy to stay in your industry and interview people that look like you, marketers, business people. And for this topic, I decided to kind of venture out a little bit to another industry and get a fresh perspective that us marketers, entrepreneurs can learn from as we go about building our own visual storytelling strategies. So with that, I'm super excited to have Natalie Kosturik. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we're going to cover this exciting topic because I was really intrigued by her story when we met about how she's rewriting stories for her clients in order to shape their realities. And when you think about it, marketers do the same thing for customers, but in our case, we are doing this in order to sell more products that those products will play a role in changing our customers' lives. So with that, welcome to the show, Natalie.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Wow, I'm so excited to speak with you about this topic because as you remember, we talked about the extreme parallels in both our industries. And before we get deep into the root question of the day, why don't you kind of walk us through your journey, how you got started?
And this fabulous world of mental health. Like anyone else, I think it started with my own personal journey of growing up. As I was growing up, I grew up in an immigrant family, so not quite American and not quite Croatian, this very sort of odd middle place in this alternative reality, very different from my American friends. And so I didn't fully understand the experience of what it meant. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like all of it. I didn't like the story that was unfolding in my life, all of the characters in and out of it, the experiences. And I was like, I just felt like there had to be something more than what was happening right in that moment. Yep. And so I just knew that psychology was my avenue. I've never doubted it for 5 seconds because I just knew that I wanted to be more than I was in that moment, and that the story that was shaping my life wasn't the one that I wanted it to end with.
So psychology is the rewriting machine, so to speak.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, aren't we all storytellers?
Exactly. So that's amazing. So when you think a little bit about your profession as a therapist, you probably seen throughout the years many clients. So what would you say the most common roadblock your clients need help with?
So people get stuck in their story.
Right.
And the pain, everyone has pain points in their life. When you meet somebody, in order to get to know each other, we tell a story.
Right.
So when someone's had something traumatic or difficult happen in their life, mm-hmm. when there's usually trauma, there's something that wants to be expressed because of what took place. When there's not the chance to tell the story about what happened, or that your story makes other people uncomfortable or unhappy, because we live in this culture where you're supposed to be happy, like just be positive. If somebody says that to me, I think my head's gonna explode. And so what ends up happening is you get stuck in it because it's just an unexpressed part of yourself. And so people come into therapy to be able to unlock these secrets and express what's actually happened, so that they're no longer a character in that story. They become their own hero because they've moved past the story and now embody a new positive characteristic about themselves as a result of the pain. So if someone can convert the pain into something positive information of positive change. It's no longer pain.
Right, right.
It's a story of triumph.
They come to you with a million stories that all of them have a negative resolution in some cases. And that's where they're stuck on the resolution.
Yeah.
That's amazing, because what I do as a visual storyteller, helping brands, specifically entrepreneurs, kind of discover their brand narrative. And part of it is really discovering their personal narrative as part of the process that I go. So what I keep telling them is that, for using our framework, it's a way for me to kind of extract the story that's buried within you already. So you have the story, we just need to extract it. So I bet you do the same thing with your clients, where it's not about their business side, but it's more about their personal narrative that's buried within them. And maybe you can talk about your process.
Oh, okay. It's really interesting because we really do kind of the same. We really do the same work. You do brand identity. I do identity.
Personal identity.
Personal identity, which is your personal brand, right? Like, we're all selling something all the time, right?
Yep.
Please like me. So the way that therapy works is when somebody comes in with their story. Mm-hmm. I guess it's sort of a take on narrative therapy. There's a lot of narrative therapy elements in what it is that I do. But we start with the story that the person's been telling, right? This is the history. We gather the history. I'll probably listen for a couple of sessions about history because I don't like to just jump in. I really want to know the depths of the story. And when we talk about the story, we talk about the evolution of their story from the early years until adulthood, wherever it is, however old they are, whatever the time frame is. And when they're telling the story from the place of the age that it took place.
Right.
So when you're referring to the pain experience as a child, I want to hear about it from that child place.
Yeah.
What was that like for you in that space? Because then they can connect to who they were at that time, because it's kind of far away, right?
Right, right.
So it gives a little bit of a safer perspective. Mm-hmm. And then we move through that story so that we identify what were the pitfalls of the story, what were the roadblocks, how were you, what was not given to you, what was the lack of safety, which is like probably everybody's story. That's in everybody's story, is a desire to be safe. Yeah. And so when we identify what those things are, we can also find out what are the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors that have come as a result of those stories. And then as they have some sort of begin to develop compassion, I guess, for who they were at these various stages of their life, they begin to move through the story. One of the ways that we begin to integrate the differences is we start challenging those old thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with new ones, right? So if you're used to saying, I'm a constant failure because that's what you were told, you can't do anything right. Yeah. You start to look in the world that their job literally becomes that anytime that they have that thought, they have to go into their day with the purpose of finding where it is that they are doing great and where they're being validated. I see. And keep track of it. Because what we have to do is we have to counterbalance the old thoughts, feelings, and beliefs and ways of being with new ones. Right. So it's a very challenging approach because people really are resistant to change. It's like, I have all of this proof that I'm this terrible human being who can't be successful. And then there's fear. And so as we do these things, they begin to move through fear and they experience themselves in a new way. And once you experience yourself in a new way, the old way begins to fade.
That's very interesting what you're saying, because, in some cases, I bet, this negative story are really hard-coded, very hard in their mind. So in terms of changing the story, they're telling themselves, as a visual storyteller yourself, are you using any visual cues in their environment for them to kind of keep reminding them? Because, it's a visual mental story they're telling themselves, but in order for them to change, that line of code in their mind, they need to get some, physical triggers.
Sure. So, there's ways of doing that. So part of it can be sort of altering their interaction with their day. So developing now I gotta take this back. Hold on a sec. The visual triggers. What do I do with that?
Do they have notes on their fridge, for example, or some objects that are symbolic for something else?
So one of the things that I have done is when a client is really deep in the story and needs a clue, I'll have them wear a necklace or something that they can hold on to that's a symbol of a new space, or it could be a piece of jewelry that they wear. Some clients actually like the rubber band to fling on their hand, that cognitive approach, to snap them back and out of their headspace. It's personalized, to be honest, because it has to be a personal experience. Some people like the writing down a list of I am statements about who they are now as a reminder, or just keeping track of the really positive statements and that they get from other people during the day, like, great job, oh my God, I can't believe you did that in record time. Things like that. So it's wide.
Sure. And
vision
boards and all kinds of other
sure. Vision boards, I love when people go. I'll send them to classes actually for vision boards. Because that's a whole visualization that's possible. Meditation is also a brilliant way of keeping yourself.
Definitely.
Creating new visual cues for yourself.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked when I did research for this episode is checking out your Instagram account. And I saw that you're so creative in terms of a variety of quotes and analogies. So is there any particular analogy that you really, think this is really encapsulating succinctly your belief? I know that you have a bunch of them, like life as a video game, for example.
I love that one. I use that one actually a lot, believe it or not. People really relate to technology and to video games. Right? We grew up playing video games. I don't know anybody who hasn't.
Right.
So when you talk about what's going on in their life, as everybody starts off in the game together, and then you develop different skills throughout the game, and you can all be on the same level, but now you have new skills and new abilities that help you level up.
And you get new dragons, by the way. Each level has its own dragons, right?
Each level has its own dragons and demons. You have to slay them and get to the other side. And it's really cool because when you look at life that way, then you begin to realize that everything that's happening, that you're moving through, is happening for you, to teach you, to elevate you, to improve you, so that when the dragon comes, you have the tools to slay it quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, and another similarity to what we're both doing is I always say that you need to treat the customer as the hero of the story, and my role is really serve as a guide or mentor along their journey. So I bet you are doing the same thing, because I read a little bit about you on your website, and you're just saying, your experience is yours. I'm just here to kind of help you interpret it and the right way, and kind of detonate, different.
Right. The client is always the expert, right? They're always the expert on themselves. They know. However, it's just like when somebody's going to you for visual storytelling, you bring a different perspective to them so they can see their world from a wider place.
Exactly.
That's what I do as a therapist. I help them see their world from a wider place, because I have an entirely different life and experiences and education than they do. And so I help them see themselves in a new light. Like when my clients come in, they're like, I'm so depressed. I'm like, that's so fantastic. Oh my God, you're feeling stuff. This is awesome. And they look at me like I have 14 heads. And then I begin to explain my perception, how I see depression and anxiety and our different emotional states, because they're there to provide us information. What becomes negative about something like depression is it makes other people uncomfortable. Right? Oh, I don't want to see her sad. Oh my God, they're going through so much. This is such a bad thing. No, it's not. It's just depression. It'll pass.
Exactly.
Hold on one sec. Let me make sure. I'm on Wi-Fi. Okay.
One thing you mentioned about perspectives is obviously when you talk to one client, it's their perspective about their story, and you kind of, they bounce it back with you. But when you have a couple that needs a marriage consulting, obviously you have two conflicting stories that you need to bridge. So can you talk a little bit about that, how you move a couple from this is my story to our story?
You know, where couples really get stuck is their inability to express their own story. And so the goal is to get to the heart of the story. It's not the story itself that's important. It's the emotional need that's not being met, which is what's trying to be expressed through the story. Wow. So the job becomes is how do we get to the emotional place so that what you're expressing is more of an emotional need that somebody can give to you versus, well, you just don't help around the house at all and I take care of everything and now we have no time for each other. Well, the thing is that I want a partner. I want somebody who loves me and cares about me and sees that I'm stressed out and will jump in and help out. That's a really different request than you jerk, you're not helping me. And so when we can get two people to understand what the emotional needs are of each other, then they can begin to act in a different way. So we break down their story to the emotional components. And once we understand that, then things start to flow and we teach communication skills and just more emotional intimacy and empathy for one another. Yeah,
and once the stories meld, obviously the reality changed for the better. And that's where you could see actual changes. So that's
well, that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that means, better.
Yeah, so maybe kind of to bring it to life for our audience, maybe you can give us one or two examples of, at least in broad strokes.
Okay, of like a situation with a client?
Yeah, that you can help reshape their reality.
All right, well, I had a client who was severely depressed, probably hadn't been out of bed in like a week, like except to like go eat something and go back in bed, hadn't showered, had several losses of very, very close people in their life. And we're also going through their own health issues, like really like dealing with cancer and their own cancer treatment. So they were kind of in the space of wanting to give up.
Yep.
And when we came together, we talked about their story and what had unfolded and the meaning of losing these two very significant women in their life. It happened 1 year apart on the same exact day, which is crazy, right? Yeah. And so what we did is we talked about the significance of these people, what they brought to her life, what she still carries of them with her. And so we took them from what used to be to what still is, which is her being, who she is, and how they've transformed who she is into someone better, more than she even imagined or was able to recognize because of her own grief. Once she realized that she had actually integrated parts of who these beautiful souls were into herself, it was a different story. Now this wasn't a story of the of death and loss. This was a story of triumph and support and love and progress in her life. And so we literally worked together maybe like 3 months and then she was done.
And that's the magic, I think, when we think about stories and how they can reshape reality. When you think about it at the very basic level, it's about really modifying meanings.
Yeah.
We all carry different meanings that we interpret, those subjective meanings, because these are really the ones that makes a difference in someone's story. So change their meanings to events from the past, to experiences, things that happens to them, then you could start seeing how the story starts changing. So,
right. And they have to connect to the meaning. The meaning has to be real for them, right?
Right.
Which is why when somebody's like, just be positive, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's got to be believable. Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be a meaningful story that connects to who you are authentically.
Right.
So that you own it. And now it's a real part of who you are.
Right. So now let's talk about you wearing the business business person hat for a second, because when I did a research for this show, I was coming across an interview that you did where you say this interesting statement: there is this constant balancing act between sharing who you are without crossing a boundary, finding your genuine voice without trying to sell service. I think this is super important to our audience that can easily sometimes fall into the trap of becoming too salesy, kind of a commodity service. And at the end of the day, we want to kind of project our real value. So how do you do it from your perspective?
Well, I know myself.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, happy to report. And so when I am sharing, it's really my authentic voice. Mm-hmm. It's really how I view the world. Yeah. It's the most honest that I can be. And when I'm being that, I realize that not everyone is going to like what I have to say, or it's going to resonate with them. Just because I can forgive easily doesn't mean that you can forgive easily.
Yeah.
Because I have a different, it means something entirely different to me. And so I'm okay with people not liking everything that I have to say. Like, I am A-okay with that.
Right.
But I'm getting them to think, even if they don't like it, if they're thinking about it, then great. I feel like then I'm good. I'm done. I'm not selling something per se. I am inciting thought that maybe leads to a different thought and a different way of being and a different way of feeling that I may never even hear about or know.
I see.
And I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. So when you're marketing your services, you are typically try to focus on a common pain point that you're coming across in your practice and just give your perspective, and with the hope that your original perspective will be perceived as an authentic observation with your target audience, clients, couples, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll often share something personal, like my personal observation, how I'm experiencing the world
Got it.
at the moment in time.
Yeah. The role of vulnerability and imperfection definitely helps here.
I think people run away from vulnerability. I am beyond grateful for the work of Brene Brown, bringing vulnerability to the forefront, because it's a strength. It's a strength in a brand too, to be vulnerable, to be raw, to be honest. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is what we're about.
Right.
And we're sticking to it, whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
Because it's real.
Yeah. One thing you also talk about is your unmasking approach, and the context here is kind of interesting because we just talked a minute ago about how you really learning the story of your client, the history, to get a better understanding. But we all know that stories more often they actually carry negative meanings that either your client, their family, their friends, work, society are all kind of assigning to them. So how do you interview other perspectives of the story, or are you relying on one source, or how can you unpick the other sources?
So when a client comes in with their story, what we do is because people want to look good, right? Everything is about looking good and fitting in and wanting validation, and I get that.
Yep.
We all want it. There's nothing unhealthy about that. But not everybody has the same level of importance, right? The way that your spouse thinks and feels about you and your kids, well, that's going to be way up there, right? So we prioritize who's really significant, what's super important and what's not. And sometimes simply just putting it in a hierarchy of most important to least important,
Right.
it becomes much easier to separate the stories from those where you're like, does this really matter that much? So they begin to loosen the reins a little bit.
Yeah.
They begin to loosen the reins a little bit, not hold themselves so tight to this perceived meaning that they've given this story.
Yeah.
And then becomes a much easier process of truly identifying what's your real voice, who are the people that matter the most, and are you speaking to them? Because that's valid, that's part of you, that makes sense for who it is that you are.
Right.
And maybe these other people just aren't that important and they need less importance.
And do you go and kind of interview other characters in the story, or you just rely on your client's story?
What do you mean by that? Like, am I pulling in other people?
Yeah, let's say you have a client that tells you a very painful story that involves other characters. When I say characters, it could be, maybe my aunt, my mother, somebody else that's connected to the story, and kind of create negative meaning that triggers this reaction from the client.
So what I'll do sometimes is I will ask them how to tell the same story, but from different perspectives.
Oh, I see.
So they can tell the story from the perspective of their aunt. Of course,
Right.
Once they tell it from the different characters, you begin to see where their thoughts are on all these different people in their life. And then then that even helps further with what their pain points are, how they perceive that, how they think that other people perceive them. Because that may or may not be true. I mean, really? How many people are asking that question? Like, do you really think this of me? Nobody? I mean, one maybe.
Dual story effect, the story you tell yourself and the story people tell about you. Completely different thing.
I have to tell you, I've heard recently a story about me and I was like, are you talking about me?
Yeah.
Never said that, never did that. Okay.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, was I there?
So it seems like emotions play a very cardinal roles in stories. In brand storytelling, we keep saying there's an emotional arc that every story goes through ups and downs, and there's different six types of emotional arcs in stories. Rags to riches. There's a variety of them. So as you kind of, it's almost like a equalizer, kind of managing the ups and downs in the story of
Right.
clients.
Yeah, totally. I do.
And just bringing, the up stories, the end of the story. Is there any kind of a strategy that you are using, to really kind of focus on the emotion component of the story? Because that's really what matters at the end of the day.
Well, one of the things that I do with my clients is we define emotions versus feelings, because I think people mix those two things up, right? Emotions are just your emotional experience. I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm anxious, I'm fearful. Those are just emotions. Emotions come, emotions go. All day long, you're
passing clouds.
I'm sorry?
Passing clouds.
Yeah. But feelings are the stories that we tell about our emotions. And so we begin to dissect what the difference is, like which part of this is an actual emotional experience and which is your story, your interpretation of this emotional experience. When you're doing that, that's when you start pulling out the voices, right? The negative self-talk, because those aren't their voices, those are learned voices. Those are voices from the past speaking into your present, trying to influence. And so we have to separate those out. And so when there is a distinction between emotion and feeling, there's a lot more clarity that someone can get, because people don't talk about that.
No, absolutely.
They don't talk about it.
So,
yeah.
That's fascinating. I know we can talk for hours now, but since we're going towards the end now, I want to kind of bring it back to the business context. And obviously, our audience, entrepreneurs, marketers are humans as well, right? So they carry stories to work, and definitely this is something that affect their reality. So what would you say your top 3 tips marketers could take to improve their reality for their customers?
Be authentic. I think the hardest thing, even when I'm trying to find a product or a company or that I want to support because it's something I need, just tell the truth. Be real. Like if you're organic, non-GMO, truly be organic and non-GMO. Don't make me find out from the food babe that you are actually none of those things, just an incredible liar. Like I now will never come back to you. Right. You have officially lost me.
Yep.
I'd rather they be real and truthful and honest. Like that helps so much. And 2, I think being open to conversation with your consumers directly. You're not going to be perfect all the time. Owning your flaws as a company, I mean, we all make mistakes. I don't know a single human being, which is what a company is comprised of, that's not going to make a mistake. And so own it, do the best that you possibly can. If your customer's really upset, listen. It might not be about you per se, but you're in the line of fire. Right. Like, I'm really sorry that we're part of making your day bad. You'll have an entirely different experience with them. And I think ultimately it just really comes down to being willing to lose, because you're not going to be able to serve everybody, and you're not going to meet everybody's needs, and you're not going to have all your reviews are not going to be perfect. And if they are, you're probably doing something wrong, because you need some people disliking you. You need a little bit of both, and it's okay for that to happen. And I think you can do that. That's sustainability. That's knowing who you are, whether you're a human being or you're a brand.
No, absolutely. I mean, I come across these issues every day. So I think you hit on really very important 3 areas that marketer businesses could really address in their daily lives. Absolutely.
It's just being real.
Yeah. So simple, right?
I mean, it's like, when Amazon loses my packages, I just want to know what's going on. And that they're going to step up, and if somebody calls and says, I'm so sorry, this happened, we lost your package, we're going to make this better. Right. Okay, great. What can you do to make it better? Like, we're having a conversation.
Yeah. So even conflicts are really opportunities for you to change the resolution from negative to positive. So it's not a bad thing.
Right. And that's everything, right?
Yep.
That's what we're here to do.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, such great tips and from your experience in therapy to the world of marketing. Who knew? But they're connected.
I didn't until we met.
They are connected at the hip. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. And for our audience, how can they contact you if they have questions?
It's probably the easiest to find me on my website, Natalie Kusturic, KUSTURIC.com. And then you have my email and my phone number there. It's awesome. Easy.
That's fantastic. Thank you again, Natalie. This has been fascinating. I know I'm going to talk to you some more about all these great topics. And for all of you listening or watching on YouTube, we'll talk soon on the next episode of the Visual Storytelling Today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Visual Storytelling Today is recorded in Miami, Florida. The show is published exclusively by Visual Storytelling Institute. Learn more at visualstorytell.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on the iTunes Store. Until next time, don't let your big story wait to be told.